Thank you to Anna and Nathan for having me here once again. I remember being here last year, it was most enjoyable. So I'm just going to start with a little preamble. BlinkLab has been listed on the ASX for just on 2 years now. We did raise $17.5 million a few weeks ago. Not an easy thing to do, but it was heavily oversubscribed. We had almost $30 million in the book. That was led by Morgans, and I should also say that Morgans is in fact commenced analyst research, and I just had the privilege of reading that report this morning. I haven't seen the price target on it yet, but it is nice to see formal coverage by one of the largest stockbroking firms in Australia, so that's great to have. Now, just wanted to say it's something that was very interesting that happened recently. You might recall some news out of Perth, which is terrifically horrible. A family that decided to end themselves, two autistic boys, in one of the most exclusive suburbs in Perth. I remember reading it at the time when the news broke, and Albo was commenting on it, and Roger Cook, our Premier in WA. But these two boys were diagnosed with autism, but they were diagnosed late. The one was non-verbal, the other one was verbal. They both went to the same school that my son went to. I didn't know the family, but what a horrible situation when the parents decided to kill their entire family, 2 dogs and the cat as well, because they felt that they weren't getting sufficient support for the plight that they were in. Now, personally, I'm sort of thinking, well, it's not like they don't live in a very expensive suburb. If they needed some money, maybe they could have sold their house and downgraded a bit, but they chose to end their lives. But I'm just thinking, the reason why I bring this up today was that we've just had the budget come out, there's been all these cuts. I tell you, Albo, if he was sitting in this room, I'd say, you better watch what happens if something horrible like that happens again. And you watch how people point the finger at you for any cuts that you've done to the healthcare systems, particularly for families with this particular plight. But there's one thing that's very important, and that is early diagnosis leads to early intervention, and early intervention leads to far better outcomes. Now, that is the general principle in medicine, and BlinkLab has developed an objective diagnostic tool using a smartphone developed at Princeton University, exclusively licensed to us, and we can disrupt the way that diagnosis for all neurological disorders can be done. Now, the share price of this has been terrific up to a point. Unfortunately, when I raised that money, I had to do it at 65 cents. That was just the market conditions as it was. It was heavily oversubscribed, but I think we've started to see an upturn again, particularly with all the tremendous news flow that we've got coming up over the course of this year. And we don't have that many shares on issue. We are well cashed up. There's only 2 types of companies in this world, in the small to medium cap space. There's companies that have cash, and there are companies that need to raise cash. And I'd much rather be in the former in the current economic conditions. And you know which companies are looking to raise money, and they will always be heavily discounted, particularly when the market is poor. But we're well cashed up, and we've got a great team. I don't really need to tell you what autism is. This is one of the most topical subjects in the world today. It's the #1 subject in healthcare. And it's a big problem, and it has all kinds of impacts, not only for the children, but also for the caregivers, and also for the governments at large as well. And we know that the prevalence is only going up. Now, I don't exactly know why, but Australia is a hotbed for autism in the world, but same in the United States and around the world. This is a big problem. And the wait time is 2 years on average. It can be extended to 3 or 4 years. And the reason why is that only a psychiatrist is qualified to diagnose autism. That's the problem. The GP is only the gatekeeper to a specialist. The GP is not going to assess and diagnose autism or ADHD for that matter. You need to see a psychiatrist. And the problem is that parents are presenting with concerns. They all have to be assessed, and that leads to very long waiting times. And that is enormously stressful for the families and the caregivers. There's no biomarker, not currently, in terms of an actual test. It is all observational, and that's what the psychiatrist does. They sit down with the kids, they observe them, and they're using these questionnaires, and there's so many now different questionnaires. It's all subjective, but this is how it's done. This is the gold standard, and it's the gold standard that BlinkLab has to compare itself to. And the cost is tremendous. you can see here, just in terms of autism, 41% of all NDIS payments are for autism. Now, let me ask a quick question. There are a lot more children in the NDIS program for autism than there are for adults. Do we spend more money on the children or the adults? Which one? Adults, big time adults, even though they represent only 1 in 10 of the people in the program. And why is that?
Awareness?
No.
Greater disability?
No. The kids aren't living at home anymore. They're adults. Independent care living. This is the biggest cost in the NDIS. And you imagine that thousands and thousands of children that are now currently in the program who will then progress to adulthood. If you think the cost of NDIS is expensive now, you wait 10 years to see what happens then when these kids are independently living and on governmental support. Early diagnosis is the only way to get them to be more independently living. Early diagnosis, early treatment, better outcomes. Now, I sort of just talked about that. This is just a description of how it actually works. It's simply an application on a smartphone. So you can see the child here. He's wearing his headphones because you want to get the stimuli into their brain. They're watching a cartoon in this case, but every now and then they're getting whacked with this visual and audio stimuli, and it's making the child blink. It's called the facial reflex. Just like a knee tendon reflex, you cannot prevent it, you can't stop it. And that beep that they're not expecting is causing that child to blink. Now, the forward-facing camera on the device is actually analysing their face. Now, this is not neurometrical science that we've invented. This has been published in papers going back 50 plus years. What we've done is taken and put into a smartphone and exclusively licensed from Princeton University. And there's a lot more smarts to it than just this, but essentially that's it. Now, this is probably my favourite slides here. I just want to watch in demonstration how it actually works. This is a neurotypical child. Watch what happens. See how he blinked? Now, every person in this room would do so in a loud noise. If somebody, say, the fire alarm went off, we would all blink. That's neurotypical behaviour. Now, this person is now getting something special. Did you notice how he didn't blink? I'll try it again. No blinking. That's because this is pre-pulse inhibition. This PPI test has been around for a long time, but what you can see here is because of the soft sound before the loud sound, and by the way, that's only about 50 milliseconds apart. So I've slowed it right down so you can hear it, but the child's actually only hearing what sounds like 1 beep. It's actually 2. No blinking. This is an autistic child. Single beep. Nothing unusual there. Every person will do that. Blinks anyway. Now, that is a phenomenon that we did not invent, but we are exploiting in BlinkLab's technology. As I said, the patents are so wide and extended. And this is the principle behind BlinkLab. So we're using this technology to detect all kinds of features and movements in the face. It's not just blinking. And this is a very important, probably the most important slide. When it comes to FDA approval, having this sort of peer review acceptance and publications is really critical for the FDA. And this publication was only recently published at the end of last year, and there's more publications on the way. We're not just looking at blinking, it's screen avoidance, head rotation, side-eye movements and so forth. This is all part of the neurometrical assessment for autism. So as I say, it's a lot more complicated than I'm just describing. But does it actually work? Well, we just did a big study of 485 children. We published the results late last year, and we demonstrated 84 and 85% sensitivity specificity compared to a formal gold standard diagnosis by a psychiatrist. This study cost millions of dollars, and I had no idea. It was a double-blind clinical trial. To get that outcome based just on a smartphone that is purely objective, it knows nothing about you. It doesn't care if you're a boy or a girl. By the way, girls are much better at masking autism than boys subjectively. It doesn't matter with this one because it's objective, a digital biomarker. And the FDA has said that we need to get over 65% accuracy to get FDA approval, and we're punching well above that. And that's a big trial, 485 kids. This is really important. Look at those centres. I mean, I couldn't be more proud of my team to think that we have the 10 most prestigious centres in the world, all based in the United States, running this new FDA regulatory study. This is the big one. And this will be for 550 odd kids, so not much bigger than the trial we already did, but this time with 10 centres led by the Vanderbilt Kennedy Center for Autism Research, the most premier institute in the world. And so they are recruiting. Now notice all the recruitment, it's geographically spread. That's important from the FDA because they want to know, they want all creeds and colours in this trial. I want to make sure that an Asian kid is no different to a white kid versus a Latino kid or a black kid or whatever. Now there isn't really any difference, but I've got to demonstrate that to the FDA, hence this trial, which is already commenced. And we'll read out its results at the end of this year. And then we hope to get FDA approval, and that will be groundbreaking. Now, this is actually really my favourite slide. This is really, really important. If I had to leave one thing upon you, it's this one. If you notice these double beeps here, I've already demonstrated that earlier on autism. Okay, so you've got the double beep. Now you can see these lines. That means, what does that tell you? It means that the people who are taking this test are blinking on the second louder beep. But here for ADHD, they're blinking on the first softer beep. That's a clear biomarker differential between autism and ADHD. Now, I like the ADHD market. That's 5 or 6 times more prevalent. And more importantly, to treat ADHD, it requires drug treatment, not behavioural intervention, but drug intervention. Now, if your game is to make money, as mine is, then you're in the market for one of the most competitive spaces in the world for drugs, which is amphetamine drugs to treat ADHD, one of the most overprescribed drugs there is. And when you've got a digital biomarker to distinguish between autism, ADHD, or control, in this case neurotypical, that is a money-making machine in terms of any company that wants to acquire the technology that can diagnose ADHD. And we've got a big study, 400 kids in Europe, in the Netherlands, that's reading out next month on ADHD. I'm just leaving you that, it's coming. I don't know the outcome, it's a double-blind trial. But if we come good on that, our share price is only reflective of the autism opportunity, not ADHD. That's coming. So in terms of our milestones, you can see they're all very near term, and everything that we've done to date, we have met. Every single milestone we have met on time, and I hope that will continue. ADHD trial, the European one, is going to read out this second quarter. I can tell you there's a lot of eyes on the stock just for that. And then in terms of how do you make money, well, those 10 centres that I showed you earlier, they're the first adopters. They're the leading researchers in the space. So they'll be the ones who are participating in our trial who will be the first adopters of the technology. But ultimately, this is a screening test. This is a low-cost screening test that every kid can be used with a GP. And remember, the diagnosis goes to the GP, not the parent. That's an important distinction. Otherwise, the FDA would never approve it. It has to be a tool to assist the doctor in making a diagnosis. And as a screening test on millions of kids, at a couple of $100 a pop, we can make tremendous amounts of money. Now, this is essentially, in terms of rolling it out, I don't want to talk about that one. I want to talk about, these are the other centres that we're doing. So this is mental care group, Monash University Children's Hospital in Melbourne is conducting a big study as well. There's the potential to use this for dementia and other things. We're not spending money on that. I'm focused on autism, ADHD. But if we were acquired by some big pharma or a big tech company, they would definitely want to use this as a platform to pursue those opportunities. The IP, as I mentioned, it's just extensive. That's most important if you want to sell your company to big pharma or big tech. I did sell my last company, ResApp Health, to Pfizer in September 22 for a great deal of money. I don't really need to be standing here, but I'm doing it because I enjoy it. This is fun. I love it. I didn't get a chance to, I'm finishing there, but I just want to mention one last thing because I actually forgot to conclude the slide. But we just made a big announcement a couple of months ago in Morocco. Now, can I tell you how bizarre that was? The King of Morocco has decided to roll out BlinkLab across his entire nation of 50 million people to test 3 or 4 million kids annually, starting now. And the thing's not even regulatory approved yet. And that's just based on the results of our trials to date. So maybe there's some touch with the King of Morocco, but they've done this. I've never seen that before, where the country rolls a product out before it's even approved. And that's even been funded by Qatar, which they're spending a lot of money, fine by me, but they obviously fall within their sphere of influence in Morocco. So I appreciate your time. BlinkLab's listed on the ASX. I hope you can come on the journey with me. Thank you.
Just before you go, and we'll get some questions for everybody at the end of this. When you sit down with the FDA, as that often is the case, and you have to explain your case and pitch your idea and the science, and before they allow you into the next stages, do they give you guidance and influence or positivity to say, yes, this is something we need, if you can come back to us, then we're going to help you move forward?
You know, that's a really good question. So the FDA, if you don't sit down with the FDA when you're designing a clinical trial, you're an idiot. And a lot of companies don't do it. We certainly have had multiple meetings with the FDA. And because if you think about it, the technology is pretty out there. Using a smartphone to diagnose a neurological disorder has never been done before. So you have to have meetings with the FDA. And they won't tell you what to do. They'll give you advice and say, we think you should do this. And one of the pieces of advice was, we need to have multiple centres recruiting children right across continental USA. And that's because of the creed colour differences that might come through on the trials. And they also set the benchmark. Now, why wouldn't we go for 100% accuracy? Does anyone know why? Why is that not possible? Why couldn't we be 100% accurate?
Because of the sample size for the trials?
No.
Well, you need to see something wrong before you can say...
No.
Doctors aren't necessarily 100%.
Yes, it's because we're comparing to a subjective diagnosis that's not 100% in of itself. And the FDA knows that. We cannot be 100% accurate because the doctors don't always agree anyway. They might say this kid's autistic and this one's ADHD. Maybe they're even comorbidity. It's a complex field. So they recognise that, and the doctors know that. That's why 65% or above is highly commercial to us. But just imagine on this big trial that we're doing now on the 550 kids in the US with those 10 centres, if we repeat those results of 84, 85 or thereabouts, that's extremely commercial.
A massive data set too.
Of course, and data sets are important to the big players. Yes?
Quick question, how do you get over the fact that about 80% of autistic kids have also got ADHD? How does that influence your blinking test?
Yeah, well, I mentioned that comorbidity thing. I don't think it's actually as high as 80%. I don't know where
it's
you...
pretty high though. I think it's
Right.
like 70 to 80%.
Okay, so this reaction time, it's actually the forward-facing camera. Is if you blink or do whatever movement, it's 100 different points on the face. The technology that we've developed is so smart that based on that reaction time in milliseconds, not only determines if the person is autistic and where on the spectrum they sit, but also whether it's ADHD or both. It's all done through the AI machine learning algorithms, and it's been trialled and tested on thousands and thousands of kids. By the way, another thing I like about ADHD, I've got a few friends who've been diagnosed with ADHD. I mean, I don't see any value in it myself, but it's certainly valuable to them. I like that they've got money. It's great. They're adults. They don't need to get something. They can pay for it themselves. And boy, do they do that, because that's why Ritalin and drugs like that are just so prescribed. So the ADHD market is a tremendous one. Any other questions?
Do you have any competition on?
So there are two companies that have been approved in this space. They're both private, so I don't have any information on publicly, but one has already received a de novo approval, which means a first in class, and the other one is a 510K. Now, they both have results published to date that is between 50 and 70%. The one was de novo was 50-odd%, which is bullshit. And ETD, the other company, Cognoa is that company, and ETD have around 70%. And we're sitting at 85%. The problem with ETD, I don't consider Cognoa competition at all, because it just doesn't work. But ETD used the facial reflex stuff. They've got one massive flaw, and that is they have to have a hospital room set up in a hospital with high-speed cameras focusing on the child's face. Now, it works, but it's not scalable. And we've got a smartphone technology that can be used by any parent on their child on a smartphone, but the diagnosis goes to the GP, not to the parent.
We'll have some more questions at the end of the session, but we might move on to the next one. Thank you, Brian.
Thank you for your time.